The Dorset Select Board revisited the issue of controlling excessive noise in town at its meeting Tuesday, April 18th, following up a public hearing held last month on a proposed ordinance that would set ground rules and limits on what was allowable. One point of discussion at the Select Board meeting on the 18th was whether or not the proposed noise ordinance, if adopted, should apply evenly across the town, or just in certain areas where complaints about noise have been the most frequent. Those have centered on the village of Dorset, when receptions or parties at one of the town's venues went on a little longer and a little more loudly than some of the nearby residents would have preferred.
Would you like to be driven out of your home for 6 straight hours every time there's a reception? You know, the comments last month.
Please direct your comments to me.
Okay, the comments last month. The people who bloviated longest and loudest don't live in the hot zones. Those of us who live in the hot zones have a real problem. And when your home is unlivable, that's just not acceptable. And that's basically all we're trying to do. We're not trying to put anybody out of business.
Okay, thank you. Clarissa?
I would question why in the world we'd make a noise ordinance and have it only for part of town. I could give a very loud, noisy party. I could have a machine doing some obnoxious thing on my field for 3 days of the week for all summer. I think that's just a waste of paper to make it for part of town. I could do fireworks illegally, which people do out of the center of town. So I think please reconsider. Don't consider that, please. There are other machines. It's not just music by any means from a loud party. There are other machines. There are even things like helicopters, which make a lot of noise, which we have one landing in some parts of town or any part of town are going to cause noise pollution, upsetting the peaceful, quiet, the right to peaceful, quiet repose in your neighborhood. We can maybe add helicopters and other commercial machines to this list and have it please cover the entire town. Maybe hours. I like the hours, 10 to 7 or whatever, something. It isn't just the center of town where there's noise. Thank you.
Clarissa Lennox, the Dorset resident shown addressing the Select Board here, expanded upon her comments in a later interview.
The day was when we didn't have to lock our doors. The day was when we could go next door to our neighbor and say, oh, you're having a loud party, can I come join you? Things are different now. And it's too bad because I think that maybe we just don't quite respect each other as much as we used to or might. And when we're thinking about ourselves, oh, why can't I give a loud party with loud music at any time of day or night and let it go on until 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, that's not being respectful of our neighbors. Fireworks is another thing that sort of gotten out of hand. Of course, everybody loves fireworks on the 4th of July, but maybe some of the loud ones are really over the top and not in a timely slot. I understand they are not allowed to be purchased in Vermont, but they can be brought to Vermont. Oh, it clearly happens. So it's just, I think the noise ordinance is, I think we're trying to make it friendly, user-friendly, but sincere so that we protect the peaceful enjoyment of the people who live in this, what I consider is probably the most beautiful town in the country.
The Select Board also heard from advocates of a middle course that would avoid a noise ordinance for now while trying to resolve noise issues neighbor to neighbor.
Although such an ordinance may ultimately be needed to address some of the noise issues in Dorset, it seems that the proposed ordinance is a bit onerous and perhaps too far-reaching. Although there are indeed some serious noise problems, it is hoped that they could be dealt with in a different and more amenable fashion. It is to recognize that some serious noise problems do exist in Dorset and to encourage the pursuit of solutions in a more rational and neighborly way. We also appreciate the efforts of the Select Board and town staff in addressing the difficult set of problems. Respectfully submitted, Walter and Dana Gilbert.
As originally drafted, the proposed ordinance did not rely on specific decibel levels to determine how much noise was too much. Rather, it used language like unreasonably loud noise as benchmarks. At the meeting on the 18th, Megan Thorne, a Select Board member who has played a leading role in developing the language of the ordinance, said that it might make sense to revise that.
The definition of what an unreasonable noise is, I think that could be clarified some. I think that it should have something to do with it being, well, Henry and I were talking about this a little bit, like a longer period of time or repetitive or continual. So it's not just someone walks by and honks their horn and someone's gonna, I mean, I don't think that would be unreasonable, but it's gotta be something that rises to a certain level, not just an occasional noise.
First of all, I agree with what Gilbert said. If you go back to the select board meeting when we first started talking about noise ordinance, I commented in that meeting that my first choice would be not to have a noise ordinance, but to work it out, which is basically what these folks are saying. And that still would be my first choice. But if we are going to have a noise ordinance, to tailor it to the problem, which is music. Because if we took the number of complaints that we have other than music is pretty small.
Non-existent.
Yeah.
Danny Pinsino, a former chairman of the town's planning commission, also thought the ordinance was a bit of an overreach.
The bottom line is we have something in place right now that is 11 o'clock curfew, where if there's any noise, loud noises or anything, and I don't think that's just Dorset. I think that's all through the, that's a general rule all through the state. And if anybody's making loud noises after that time, the state police are called, or whoever, sheriff or whoever's called, and it gets dealt with. What we've got already in place, I think, is efficient, and it's just really a matter of neighbor to neighbor addressing issues. I don't think when the selectmen have to get involved with it and the town has to get involved with it, without having a real good way of enforcing, it's just going to be frustrating. It's like dog licensing. I mean, how many animals aren't licensed in this town, but the rules and regulations are there. If they can't be enforced, or they're not being enforced, it doesn't make much sense.
The Select Board is likely to continue to research and think about where they want to go with the proposed ordinance and continue the discussion at their meeting in May. If they reach consensus on what the ordinance should contain, a second public hearing is likely to be held. For the GNet TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.